waging atrocities upon the people of Kashmir, and pellet guns and killings and rapes, all that. So this is not yet being understood by the world. And
it is very clearly understood. They don't want to do it again. The question comes back to the economic reasons.
I will tell you.
See, do you think that morality exists in political arena, or for that matter, morality is something to look up to, even in politics, or for that matter, even in diplomacy?
Just give me a point. I have served in Arab countries. Forget about the West. In Arab countries, the Arabs consider Indians very good. They call them Hindi. They call them brother. Why? Because the Indians are masters, and this I have come to this conclusion, of deception, of creating the impression that they are nice.
But they know how to sell themselves.
Yes.
And obviously
that is why
we have not known it. So I'll just give you talked about the Gulf countries, because since I was just going through a couple of very interesting articles regarding the economic ties between the Arab countries and India. I was shocked to know, why UAE is so inclined towards India? Because the bilateral trade between the two countries is $60 billion, 60,
yes.
$60 billion, 30 of import, 30 of export from India.
Yeah.
And on top, around 3 million people from
working
the Indian working in UAE, sir. Number one. I always thought that UAE is such a small country. Yes, sir. America, China, and then then you talk about Saudi Arabia, $30 billion bilateral trade, which is going to multiply at least fourfolds after that investment of 100 billion.
The investment.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
You talk about Qatar, the opposite group, such a small country. They still have ties with Qatar. Can you imagine? $19 billion worth of bilateral trade, $18 billion worth of import by the Indians of LNG, and $1 billion still negative 17 billion, but they're still friends. What I'm saying is that this is what matters. When you talk about the bilateral trade between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, $3.4 billion.
Yeah, that's
nothing. That's very unfortunate, because you need to capitalize on certain fronts, sir. If you don't, you'll be left behind.
That's not all. There is more. You see, historically, the word Hind has had a special feeling in the Arab mind. I was in Algeria. When somebody wanted to be nice to me, he would say that you are like an Indian. And that was a compliment.
That wasn't actually a compliment.
No, I mean,
when people used to say, are you from India? I said, then they would ask me that what is the difference? I said, well, we Pakistanis are much better looking than the Indians.
I used to say that, they would come to my house, have a meal, and they would say this meal is like any Indian, in an Indian's house.
Because the way they are marketed.
Just a minute. I would say that their meal has meat which they can't cook, because Hindus don't eat meat. We know how to cook meat, sir, and we serve you.
We have a blend of this side and the other side.
So I used to say, do you realize that the Indians don't know how to cook meat, how to eat meat? We know how to do
They have no concept, sir. I mean, instead of drinking the milk of the cow, they drink the urine of the cow. So what can you tell them? That is the difference.
It's very unfortunate.
And this is 2020, interestingly, sir. Now, to the second point, Afghan issue. Very close to a peaceful negotiation. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, in fact, had a very productive talk, and he was very clear by informing that India is going to play a negative role. This is exactly what was stated by Gulbuddin Hikmatyar and a couple of other allies. They do understand the importance. And at the same time, sir, when you talk about the Pakistani concern, that is exactly the same. So, are we on the same page with the Taliban factions, or, sir, there is something else? And if there is something else, what is that? And if everything is moving in the right direction, what else still needs to be done?
Well, as Mr. Qureshi said, I think the Foreign Minister, we have to counter all Indian games and tricks, because the Indians will be up to all their mischief in causing in blocking any agreement in the intra-Afghan dialogues, and also be ensuring that there is no sort of common arrangement for all power factions to take charge. So this is difficult, it's a challenge, but I think we have so far been a honest broker, and we are now being seen like that. So we as we have always said in the past, we have no favorites in Afghanistan. We want to deal with all the Afghans, and we are not in any case a party. We are the Afghans themselves. Any Afghan case must be Afghan owned and Afghan led. That's our position. So we have to counter Indian mischief, and that's about what can be done.
All right. Another important area. I'll put that question to you and then. Okay. It's about now this Council of Peace deal with the Taliban that has been formed, and Ashraf Ghani has also named the individuals that is going to be a part of that group. First of all, sir, your take on that point. And since Ashraf Ghani has done a few things which he never wanted to do, no, they were done half-heartedly, maybe, or maybe under pressure. The release of the prisoners, even first of all, acceptance of that deal that this is what is going to happen, and later on, you know, a very interesting talk between Abdullah and Prime Minister. So that was very encouraging also. Do you think the current government, the Taliban and Pakistan, they do understand the importance of Pakistan and things would be sorted out, despite the fact that Hikmat Yar has very clearly said that India is a spoiler in Afghan peace process. And he also mentioned, interestingly, that India is forming a joint militia force in Afghanistan to fight the Taliban. So that needs to linger on what exactly is going on at the moment.
Right. When you look at Afghanistan issue, it's a very complex issue. There is, there are dialogue going on. There is an effort being made for the dialogue, intra-Afghan dialogue. But I think there is a fair share formula is very difficult to reach to. So I think there's a lot between cup and the lips, and we have to see. But it is in the interest of Pakistan that we have a peaceful Afghanistan. We have a Afghanistan where all factions are satisfied, and some kind of power sharing formula, which at the moment seems very difficult to manage. Why India is spoiler? See, India has investment in Afghanistan. India has investment which has been used against Pakistan. Now, we just mentioned when we were off camera, we mentioned about India's the strategy in Afghanistan. You see, in 2016, 1,000 scholarships they actually gave to Afghan students, and every year about 1,000 to 1,500 students higher education scholarships and would graduate from Indian universities.
They go to India to get brainwashed, basically.
Yes. Now let's look at the mindset. Now those higher graduates of Indian universities come back to Afghanistan, and they are now placed in they are
at the top
diplomats,
yeah.
They are businessmen. So what difference they are making? So that is the kind of investment. And other than this student scholarships, they had number of investments in their construction businesses and their connectivity projects. So India has a lot of investment. So when there's an agreement between Afghan factions and they reach a power sharing formula in Afghanistan, so there's likelihood of peace prevailing in Afghanistan, which is not in the interest of India. So India's interest is destabilize Afghanistan. So I think India will continue to be a spoiler of.
But so when they say that NDS is like this withdraw, and obviously a lot of politicians are pretty okay with the Indians. And despite that fact, sir, don't you think that the Afghans are either stupid or what's wrong with them? That they don't understand that this is the country, these are the people who are actually trying to make sure that peace should not return to Afghanistan. It should remain the way it is, because that situation suits them.
Yeah. I just give you an example. I also fail to understand. When I was in a National Defense University, I used to interact with the Afghani scholars. So and even now when we interact with Afghani scholars, I fail to understand why and what biases they have and what are the basis of those biases. So you have just, since you are aligned with India, you have certain interests aligned with India, so you are not ready to listen to us, and there's some misgivings that you don't want to clarify with us. So I think there's some bias that they need to clarify, and we have to move forward.
All right. So closing remarks from you.
There are two losers if the deal takes place, if the peace returns to Afghanistan. One is Ashraf Ghani and the other is India. So these are the two parties which are most against it, and they will try to throw every spanner in this.
Because this man is going to go back to USA at some stage. The only man who has stakes back in Afghanistan, whether good, bad or ugly, whether we like him or we don't, that's Abdullah Abdullah.
That's right. And Pakistan's diplomacy is successful at the moment, but they must sort of redouble their efforts.
So do you think we can bring the Taliban, the current regime of not the regime, but the current decision makers of the Taliban close to Abdullah Abdullah? Can we hold that kind of a negotiation where they can sort out their issues? It won't be easy, obviously.
Just realize one thing, that this whole effort has taken place because of very strong push from Donald Trump, and his presidency is at stake at the moment. What happens after him has a question mark. So this is the time, I think now 65 days more to go for Indian election, and it's in the US election, and it's in the interest of Donald Trump himself that the soldiers should go back, and that's what he
exactly, sir. And the most important point is that who is going to win the next election? Because the current, if you look at the survey, Donald Trump has very, very slim chances.
This is what I'm saying.
If he loses, then you will be having a very typical American kind of a decision-making body sitting there and leaning on everything.
Because the deep state of US was not in favor of it.
Yeah.
And they've tried to say Trump, but this man did one good thing.
But I think a very important question would be, since we are totally running out of time, but I think that we should do a show on that as well, and that is about the role of UAE and Saudi Arabia, because Pakistan, UAE and Saudi Arabia were the three first countries to recognize the regime of the Taliban, and eventually whatever happened, who funded them and everything, we all know during the time of Soviet invasion. But now it is going to be a big question that who is going to support them and what would be their reaction if they are given some sort of a role, because it is not them dealing with the Taliban this time, it's their adversary, I would say, Qatar dealing with them. So it is going to be pretty interesting, but let's see.
But as they say that in international diplomacy, there are no permanent friends.
Never.
And those who are supporters may not be supporters, that's strong supporters now.
By the way, this business, just a comment that UAE, Saudi Arabia accepting Taliban regime, I know how that was done. We were the prime movers.
Well, let's see, sir, whether we can do it now or not. But Doctor, it was a pleasure having you. So thank you so much for your presence as well, and it's always good to see you, sir. And that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you, inshallah, tomorrow at 8. Till then, you take good care of yourself. Khuda Hafiz.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and a very warm welcome to PTV World News. I'm Shahzad Qayyum with the top stories of this hour. Petroleum prices will remain unchanged. The announcement has been made by the Ministry of Finance, Revenue and Economic Affairs. Prime Minister Imran Khan chairs a meeting to review progress on Karachi transformation plan. Prime Minister says national development is linked with development of Karachi. A strong monsoon system engulfs the country, which will produce widespread rain with heavy falls at a number of places in Sindh, Punjab, Upper Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Gilgit-Baltistan and Azad Jammu and Kashmir till Tuesday. Several areas of Karachi remain inundated in rainwater despite 4 days of relief operation. Different localities are without power, internet and mobile phone service. Water level is rising. Punjab barrages following widespread rains. Flood relief camps and units set up along Chenab and Jhelum rivers. Water level also rising in Indus at Guddu. Second review session of Afghanistan-Pakistan Action Plan is being held in Kabul today. Foreign Secretary Sohail Mahmood will lead the Pakistan delegation comprising senior officials. The first commercial flight from Israel to the United Arab Emirates lands, making a major step in normalizing relations after the announcement of a peace deal. The third and final T20 international between Pakistan and England will be played tomorrow in Manchester. Hosts are already one up in the series after 5-wicket victory in the second T20 international at the Old Trafford. PTV Sports telecasts the series live. Lyon win the Women's Champions League for a fifth consecutive year as they beat Wolfsburg 3-1 in San Sebastian. That's all for the moment. For more details and live streaming, log on to our website world.ptv.com.pk. You can find us on Facebook page with the name of PTV World and follow us on Twitter at WorldPTV. Thanks a lot for watching and it's goodbye for now.
Just like the billboard paintings performed in Pakistan, there is another indigenous form of art performed in Pakistan, and it is the truck art. With its all colorful floral patterns, depiction of human heroes with creative aspects, ratios, calligraphy of poetic verse, and drivers' words of wisdom. This form of art is truly a part of Pakistani transport tradition. Many trucks and buses in Pakistan are highly customized and decorated by their owners. These adjourned vehicles are considered as moving art or jingle art. Because of their unique decor style, these vehicles are quite distinct in layers from other trucks around the world. Each part of the vehicle is decorated differently, with variations depending on the regional style. In Pakistan, a truck driver owner usually pays $3,000 to $5,000 for their vehicle's external decoration. The art embellishes such trucks according to the particular taste of the driver. Nearly every city in Pakistan has a unique decor. The Balochistan and Peshawari trucks are heavily trimmed with wood. Rawalpindi and Islamabad trucks have permanently featured plastic work. Camel-borne ornamentation is commonly seen in trucks decorated by Sindh artists. These trucks are also representative of different local, historical and cultural regions of Pakistan. Thus, these trucks are also representative of different historical and cultural regions of Pakistan, the enchanting arts and crafts of Pakistan.
Your living is determined not so much by what life brings to you as by the attitude you bring to life, not so much by what happens to you as by the way your mind looks at what happens.
Tent pegging is an equestrian sport practiced in many countries around the world. Wooden targets are placed on ground at a specific distance, and players wearing traditional dress and turban have to run their horses and try to hit the target and pick it up with the lance. Target missing is considered as a failure. Tent pegging is thought to have originated in the subcontinent. Historians say that mounted soldiers would gallop through enemy camps, removing the tent pegs with their lances and swords. They would be followed by more mounted soldiers who took advantage of the surprise and havoc caused by collapsed tents and a confused enemy. Today, tent pegging is practiced around the world, but is especially popular in Australia, India, Israel, Oman, Pakistan, South Africa and the United Kingdom. The Olympic Council of Asia included tent pegging as an official sport in 1982, and the International Federation for Equestrian Sports recognized it as an official equestrian discipline in 2004. After independence of Pakistan, the game came under clouds because of lack of state patronage, which ultimately diversified to more glitzy, more glamorous games like cricket and hockey. Public interest in the cities thus diverted these games of glamour, yet the landlords, bourgeois and the rural folk kept it alive. New and emerging national tent pegging associations have helped spread the sport's popularity. Players from Pakistan are now regularly participating in international tent pegging competitions, and many of them have left indelible impressions by winning gold medals many a time.
Hello and welcome to Politics Today. I'm Farrukh Pitafi. Today we are going to once again talk about Pakistan's politics, especially with an emphasis on delivery. On one side we have seen that the opposition parties that seem to be disconnected had a sort of breakthrough where Shahbaz Sharif actually met Maulana Fazlur Rahman, and there the news emerged that they want, at least Maulana Fazlur Rahman wants, an agreement to be written down between opposition parties before an APC, all parties conference takes place. This is interesting because in the past, Maulana Fazlur Rahman has repeatedly complained that all these opposition parties make a lot of hue and cry, but when it comes to getting together, they disappear without providing any support. So on one side, this is important. We heard that one of the former Prime Minister's name should also be included in the Rabbar committee, the steering committee of the alliance or working alliance. On the other side, we have seen what happened in Karachi and the kind of situation that emerged, the sad situation, and the way we felt there was a vacuum of governance. The third development, which is quite intriguing, is once again, and repeatedly in this program I have reminded you that in a country like Pakistan, which has democracy, which is still strengthening, democracy and especially parliamentary democracy is always on trial. So once again a constitutional petition was filed in the Honorable Supreme Court challenging the parliamentary system and supporting the idea of presidential system. This is not all. Even the TV anchors which are more supportive of the ruling party and their participants from the ruling party have been actually supporting the idea. At least today I saw this much. So we are going to talk about all these matters. Why is it that we keep on trying to decide what direction to take rather than focus on governance? These are important issues that we are going to discuss. In order to help us understand these issues, we are joined by an eminent panel. We are joined by Waleed Iqbal Sahab, who is Senator of ruling party Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. Thank you very much, Waleed Iqbal Sahab, for joining us. The second guest that joins us via Skype is Meher Tarar, who is a columnist of renown, also writer, talk show host as well. Thank you very much, Meher Sahaba, for joining us as well. The third guest, let me start with Meher Tarar Sahaba, and let me ask her about the state of affairs at this moment in the opposition camp and then of course government camp as well. Meher Tarar Sahaba, tell me, how do you see the politics shaping up, especially politics of opposition? Why is it that the opposition parties cannot work together?
Thank you for having me on your show, Farrukh. I think the chaos of, I would call it chaos, whatever, that is apparent in the opposition vis-a-vis the government is very obvious. And I think that is because there is no real reason for them to be opposing the government the way they are opposing the government right now. I'm sorry, too much use of the words opposition and oppose right now. 2 years have passed. The government has done some good things. The government is trying to do some good things, and there are a number of things that the government can be criticized for. That is obvious to everyone who supports the government or doesn't support the government or is just observing Imran Khan Sahab's government in Islamabad. I think it's very obvious to all these parties that have gathered. I mean, it's a cluster of opposition parties, and even they know that they don't really have a legitimate reason to unite against the government at this point in time.
Right.
Their opposition is not, as they say, it is because of the way the government is performing. It's not that they have any that they want to do something about the performance of the government. It's very clear that all of them have their own personal or political. I wouldn't say I use the word grudge because I don't think that makes a lot of sense if you look at it in a bigger way. But okay. It's very clear that the opposition does not really have an agenda. Most of the mainstream leadership of different parties is facing NAB cases. Some justified, some unjustified as far as I look at them. But that's the way it is. And even and ideologically, they're also different from one another. PPP is so different from PMLN,
that's quite intriguing, actually. Because when they are in government, usually it is thought that they work in tandem. They keep on talking about differences, but as PTI has been pointing out, that after signing Charter of Democracy and after actually agreeing on joining hands under ARD, they have been functioning as allies, even though they have played the role of opposition. As we move forward, we are going to bring in the point of view of the opposition parties as well. But let me now go to Waleed Iqbal Saab, who very kindly joins us on Skype. Waleed Iqbal Saab, on one side, this is a hung parliament, and one wonders the kind of leeway that the government has, that whenever opposition keeps on asserting itself, and we hear that bills will not be passed, all of a sudden something changes and the bills are passed. On the other side, when we look at the discussion that is going on, it seems that PTI hasn't been able to focus on one topic. One by one, we keep on drifting. Now everybody is talking about presidential system again. Why is it that some of your party members are supporting the idea?
I think as far as the system goes, I'll come to that in a minute or so. But before that, because you had started off by talking about the opposition's politics,
right, sir.
I wanted to shed some light on that, and I want to take you back to the time that the 2018 elections took place on the 25th of July. On that same night, or maybe the following day, there was a so-called alliance, quote alliance, unquote, that the opposition parties had assembled.
Okay.
And they gave it a name also. And because, over the last few weeks or a couple of months, a lot of talk about opposition getting together has been coming up. I actually tried to remember the name of that alliance, because that name even didn't last for more than 2 days, or 3 days, or 5 days. And I had to look it up. I had to go on Google and see. They called themselves the Alliance for Free and Fair Elections. And at that very point, Mr. Imran Khan had not even taken oath as Prime Minister. That happened on 18th of August. But he had said right then, as the chairman of PTI, that this so-called alliance, or this the opposition, they are and they are going to be in disarray. They are going to be in disunity. And now, as you can see, they even have distrust. I mean, when has in politics of Pakistan, when has anybody heard of people asking others for a written agreement, especially when you are sitting in the opposition? This in itself is a sign of extreme or immense distrust.
Okay.
And I can tell you this much, that because I go every week, I'm on prime time shows and on different channels.
Right.
For the last 3 months, if not more, 3 months, we have been hearing about a multi-party conference for 3 months, and now that multi-party conference has not even come to fruition.
Right.
And even at the time when it appears that it might come to fruition, conditions are being imposed on it, as in having a prenup.
Right.
If I may use that.
And Waleed Iqbal sir, that was primarily my question. What kind of magic wand do you have that they don't seem to be able to unite? In Urdu, of course, they call it Gidat Singhi, but what kind of magic wand do you have that despite being a hung parliament, this parliament cannot produce a very strong opposition?
First of all, it's not a hung parliament in that sense. Yes, no one single party could win an absolute majority, and in consequence of that, there had to be a coalition. But even after the departure of Mr. Akhtar Mengal, which we have, and we believe that in due course he might just be persuaded to come back. Even after that,
Right.
The majority is comfortable. It's a coalition, but the majority is a comfortable majority. And if you look at the flip side, they say today's government is tomorrow's opposition, and today's opposition is tomorrow's government. I see no, at least in this 5-year term of the government, I see no opposition coming into office during this 5-year term.
Right.
Because of, there's no Girdhar Singhi. There is no Girdhar Singhi. There is no magic wand. It's just that ideologically, just like Meher Tarar was saying, ideologically and conceptually, they may come as one on some issues when everybody's collective interest is being threatened. But the thing is, their own individual interests are so supreme that they are never going to. It's not Girdhar Singhi on our side. It's just
that's a good point, sir. Let me bring in the opposition's point of view as well. Rafiq Rajwana Sahab, former Governor of Punjab, senior leader of Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz, joins us on via phone. Rafiq Rajwana Sahab, thank you very much, sir, for joining us. We are talking at this moment, sir, about the opposition's inability to get together even for an APC or NPC. Why is it that Maulana Fazlur Rahman is demanding that whatever agreement takes place, it takes place in written form? And then, of course, the opposition, despite having significant number in the lower chamber of the parliament, we haven't seen that kind of fireworks going on.
Well, I think that they are working on their lines and they'll be together very soon. But the other aspect is, as the Treasury bench says, that there is no opposition or there is no strength in the opposition. It may be a positive for them, then there is no hindrance for them to work. They should perform and they should deliver. We will do our job as opposition, whether they feel that we are weak or we are strong. We are doing our job as opposition. Nobody can stop us.
That's a good point, sir, but with due respect, if the opposition is not actually performing its duties, then the problem is that the government has a free rein. Don't you think that there has to be some form of accountability that has come to come from the opposition benches?
The question is, for the sake of argument, though I'm not conceding, for the sake of argument, that the opposition is not that much strong as the government claims, then they are free to work properly. They should get benefit out of that. But I feel that the opposition is doing its job and a lot of time is there to work, to sit together, to get united and to go together. And the opposition is on it to hold or to convene APC. And I hope very soon the matter will be decided and they'll proceed further according to the democratic norms, which the opposition is supposed to follow.
Can you also help us understand what is the direction the opposition is going to take in coming days? Is it actually practically going to try to unseat the government, or is it only going to work as the opposition in the parliament?
I personally feel that the government should complete its tenure, whether it's elected or elected. Let's forget about this thing now. If somebody has the reservation, we have also a very strong reservation. But I personally feel, as being a former parliamentarian twice, that let the government complete its tenure and the opposition should work as a watchdog regarding the serious issues which the people are facing. And if we keep the opposition aside, let's go to the street, let's go to the bazaar, let's go to the common man, what he is saying. Whether they are satisfied with the observation and the experience and the suffering of the common man, they should think about it.
Rafiq Rajwana Sahab, I understand that you are travelling, so I'm not going to hold you back for very long. But
I always talk positive.
But I have one last question for you. Your positive talk is welcome, but I have one more question regarding this accusation that the opposition primarily is not getting together because it is seeking an NRO based on personal interests. Hang on, sir. And because they don't have anything ideologically common among them.
No, they have. It's very interesting when the cases are pending in the courts and everybody knows what are the allegations, the observations of the Supreme Court. Why the government is worried? Time and again, what the Prime Minister says that they are seeking NRO. I will not let them go out and so and so. Let the matter be decided by the courts, whatsoever is there. That's a victimization we are saying. Why the government becomes forcibly a party in that? We are accusing the government, let the government defend itself. But the government has become a party in NAP cases and all these cases, and the Prime Minister personally takes it very seriously. I think he should not raise a slogan on this, should not raise a voice regarding this. There is no understanding and we can't think of getting any NRO. Why should we? We are facing everything. And even the ladies of the family of the the former Prime Minister, they are also being dragged in the cases.
Right. Rafiq Rajwana, sir, former Governor of Punjab, the leader of PMLN. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. Let me go back to Meher Thakur Sahiba. Meher Thakur Sahiba, you have listened to what is being said regarding opposition. But is it only about the ideological lack of unity or cohesion, or is it also about war of succession that might be going on within political parties in opposition, individual political parties? We have heard about a war of succession going on in PMLN. We have also heard about similar kind of things in People's Party as well. Do you think there is a possibility that that might be the real reason why they cannot unite?
Can you please repeat your question again? I was disconnected for a few seconds.
All right, let me repeat it here. The question is, earlier you were talking about lack of ideological cohesion between opposition parties. And one understands, one can see that point of view as well. But there has been speculation in the media for quite some time that there is a war of succession going on within political parties, especially the opposition parties, PMLN and People's Party. Is there a possibility that that might be the reason why these political parties cannot work together?
I don't know about the People's Party, but I think it's pretty obvious to anyone looking at PMLN's domestic or other politics that there is no unity in the party leadership. There is the Shahbaz Sharif. There are no real groups. It's not that they've divided into groups visibly, but it's very clear to everyone that Shahbaz Sharif and Maryam Nawaz are not on the same page. That's how it appears to anyone who's observing PMLN politics right now. I don't think that can be said about the PPP. The problem with PPP, it's too much about the party. It's too much about one family. It's too much about one party's, one family's interest. It is also true of PMLN, but PMLN at least, tries to make it about other issues. The fact that all of them insist on using this word selected, while all of them have always criticized any and every election that has taken place in Pakistan since 1977. It's very interesting just because, now the opposition in a way is stronger because the two mainstream parties that have been in power for the last last 30 years, including General Pervez Musharraf's dictatorship tenure or term or whatever the correct word is. Now, all the elections have always been alleged to be rigged. In 2017, but even in 2017, PPP was complaining about how undemocratic PMLN is, how undemocratic PMLN's criticism of the Supreme Court is, how they are corrupt, how they try to do everything to convolute the democratic process. And it's very interesting that as soon as they realize that now they have to fight for their own survival. Thank you. For their own political survival, all of them have decided to unite. But on the other hand, I would also like to say that the government should try to make them part of the process, even though they do their own games when certain bills are involved. But in the interest of Pakistan, I do believe that Pakistan government should make more of an effort to involve other parties in the process of running the country. And I would also like the government to use the word NRO a little less, because it's not really fair to everybody in the other parties, because even though there are cases on certain people, there are some cases that are not very fair to begin with, and then there are many leaders who do not have any allegations on them, and to push them all together and say that all of them are dishonest and all of them are chore and all of them are
right. That's a good point. That's a good point. Let me take the discussion back to Waleed Iqbal Sahab. He can also respond to this suggestion that maybe the government can talk less about how the opposition is all thieves or brigade of thieves, and it can reach out across the aisle. The second thing, of course, I have to remind you regarding the political system. You said that you're going to talk about that as well. Why is it that PTI, a party that has a manifesto about parliamentary system, now seems to be agitating in support of a presidential system? Waleed Iqbal Sahab.
Yeah, okay. I will talk about this second thing first, because it was a part of your previous question, and then I will come to the dealings with the opposition and how the PTI government, the coalition government, is handling the opposition. As far as the constitutional structure and the system is concerned, I am not among those who is calling for a change in the system per se, because it is now a decided fact by the stipulations of the 1973 Constitution itself, and how it has been interpreted by the Supreme Court of Pakistan in a series of judgments since 1996 or 1997. And the first judgment in that context was a judgment called the Mahmood Khan Achakzai case, which was decided by the Supreme Court in a 5-member bench of the Supreme Court, headed by, at that time, the Chief Justice Sajjad Ali Shah, about the salient features of the Constitution, the basic features, the pillars on which this existing Constitution is built. And the first pillar, and the first basic feature, the first salient feature of the existing Constitution is, well, first is federalism, second is parliamentary form of government, third is the independence of the judiciary, and fourth is blended with the Islamic provisions. These are the 4 pillars of the existing Constitution. So when you have a very basic, so I would not be one, and by the way, if anybody has been saying about the change in the system within the PTI, I don't believe anybody of any consequence or anybody who is at a very important position has expressed a desire to change the system in this context, because it's a fundamental part of our Constitution. However,
I saw the Governor Khyber Pakhtunkhwa today on the media talking in support of presidential system. That's why I brought up
today he may have said something. I haven't come across that statement. However,
a couple of
before this, on one occasion, and this was maybe 4 or 5 months ago, the Prime Minister was asked, why do you have so many unelected people in your team? So his answer was that, in a presidential system, people are unelected, you need to have technocrats and experts. So he may have shown an inclination towards it, but in order to bring about a change like that, and mind you, somebody has filed a petition. I know that. I have read it in the newspapers also. I don't believe if the petitioner is somebody who's, again, now here is somebody taking an affirmative step, like, appealing before or petitioning before the Supreme Court directly and asking that a referendum be called, and there is a particular provision of the existing Constitution asking for a referendum to be called by the President it's essentially the Prime Minister who can call a referendum on a matter of public importance. But the jury is still out. I'm telling you, as a lawyer who knows the Constitution, the jury is still out whether even a referendum can make that possible. I believe
it cannot.
Eventually the Supreme Court of Pakistan will decide on a matter like this.
Right. That's a good question.
Like that,
regarding opposition.
I'm concluding. if a change like of this nature is to be effectuated, whether it can come just by a mere referendum or whether it will call for an election of a constituent assembly, an assembly which is mandated to frame a new constitution. Because unless we frame a new constitution within the existing constitution, we can't bring a presidential system, because this constitution is parliamentary in nature.
Right.
So I would never say that,
Regarding opposition, sir, why are you not reaching out to the opposition, and why you keep on talking about NRO? That's a fair point, isn't it?
Yes and no. I'll tell you this much, that on a recent occasion, which was among the last few days of the month of June, the Prime Minister had hosted a dinner just before the passing of the budget by the National Assembly, the Finance Bill of 2020. And it was a dinner for his own parliamentarians. I was also among the senators who were invited there, because the National Assembly and the Senate members were called, even though the Senate is not a house that approves the money bill or the Finance Act. And there also he said that the main feature of his speech to those present was that I know that I can easily govern, and our government can easily, sail through these 5 years, just if I were to allow, or just if I were to say or hold or assert and make sure, and which he suggested that he could, that 4 or 5 key opposition personalities, he didn't name any, he didn't specify the party names. If I could give some assurance that I would spare, those individuals, I'd easily sail through. And he said, I remember the number, he just said 4 or 5 individuals. If I spare them, I can easily rule for the, this government can easily sail through the next, the full term. So this implied that, previously also, this two-party system, and this two-party system, there are two-party systems practically everywhere. Look at India, look at Bangladesh, look at England, look at USA. The third force has emerged and ousted the two main parties. This in itself is something that the present opposition cannot swallow, even though there are huge two big parties in there. Of the past, there were ruling parties in the past. There was some honor among thieves. And this government is not going to participate in any kind of honor among thieves, because it is not a government of thieves. So that's
an intriguing idea. Let me go back to Tatar Sahiba, because ma'am, you actually spoke about the need not to focus too much on demands of NRO. But what Waleed Iqbal Sahib is right now saying is that we have to talk about it, because opposition keeps on expecting that kind of concessions that PTI, by virtue of its own electoral promises, cannot provide them, the kind of relief they demand. On the other side, when it comes to political system, this question really intrigues me. Why is it that after 73 years of our existence, and quite a lot of time since the Constitution was framed, we still are talking about presidential system, we still are talking whether democracy is good or bad in this country? Why do you think it is so?
That is simply because the system has not been strengthened in the last 73 years. Even if the governments were inefficient or allegedly corrupt, or they did not perform the way they should have, I don't think any democratically elected government should ever have been dismissed the way they have been in the last 73 years. Coming to the other point, how I look at it is, if the Prime Minister of a country is constantly talking about giving the other side NROs or pardons or whatever the word may be, it just takes away the sanctity of the system of justice that he has talked about and fought on for so many years. the main agenda, the manifesto, the way, the essence of PTI is justice, is accountability. There is no doubt about that. It's not that Imran Khan, the Prime Minister, became the Prime Minister and he suddenly decided to go after all these people. This is what he has been trying to do for the last 22 years. There is no denying that. But when you constantly, as the Prime Minister, talks about the opposition as demanding nothing but NRO, it gives the impression that the Prime Minister, the principal leader of the country, the most important leader of the country, the person who's ruling the country, has something to do with the system that will give them, that will acquit them or qualify them as guilty. That is my main problem. That if you're going to constantly say that I'm not going to give them NRO, you're trying to say that they do not have it's not that he's saying that, it's just that the other party, the other side, the opposition, the united opposition takes the impression that the
That's a good point, Farrukh Sahib, but I'm told that there is some problem with your video signal. Let us first restore it and then I'm going to come back to you. Let me once again go to Waleed Iqbal Sahib because it is important. Waleed Iqbal Sahib, the entire idea of justice is undermined when the Prime Minister of Pakistan talks about NRO and not offering NRO, because that implies that the Prime Minister of Pakistan has the capacity to provide such kind of concession. Or is it true that the fact that Mian Nawaz Sharif, a former Prime Minister who is now a convict, and he sits or walks around freely in UK, that actually undermines the entire system or idea of justice in the country?
Okay, once again, I have to go back to another point which was being made, and I will come to this one as well.
Sure.
You have been repeatedly talking about, the system and presidential system, suggesting as if that system is dictatorial in nature and not democratic. In principle, presidential systems, wherever they are in certain countries, they are totally democratic. They are a product of constitutional democracies, like in the United States, like in France. Well, I'm not going to say Russia because there are issues over there. But there are many countries that have presidential systems which are based on an electoral democracy, constitutional democracy. So by definition, a presidential system is not undemocratic. However, in Pakistan, it unfortunately does have this connotation, and it justifiably has this connotation of being dictatorial. Because for the first 11 years of this country's history, we had a parliamentary system. And that's what the basis of this country was. It was a product of a parliamentary election of 1946, in which Quaid-e-Azam led a grand landslide victory. So from 1958 onwards until 1962, we had the martial law, and from 62 to 69, we had a presidential system. So we have had actually one constitution which was presidential in nature. And after that, from 69 to 71, we had Yahya Khan, which was just again, there was no constitution, so we had a military. He called himself president. So again, and then thereafter, leaving aside the time of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, we had from the Zia era and the Musharraf era. Even when we had a constitutional system, constitution was restored from 1985 to 1988 onwards, and then from 2002 to onwards. But as long as there were military rulers, we had a presidential system transplanted into a parliamentary constitution through the 8th Amendment of General Zia and through the 17th Amendment General Musharraf. However, that is why the connotation of a presidential system is of that of dictatorial. But once again, if Pakistan's population, if Pakistan's adult franchise rules for a different system, can a different system come? Otherwise, it will only be an expression of somebody's desire or interest. But the system of justice, if you are just getting an example of Mian Nawaz Sharif, and he being in a foreign country on the basis of
And
for
I'm coming to that, Waleed Iqbal Sahab, but just to qualify my point, I was not implying that somehow presidential system by nature is authoritarian or autocratic. My beef is not that. Although you have qualified why it might be perceived as undemocratic in Pakistan because of its own context or historical context. My concern or my beef is primarily that in these circumstances, after 73 years of existence, it actually portrays a very negative image that the country hasn't been able to decide its direction. America picked up